What war did you serve?
World War II,
And what was your branch of service?
Air Force, Army Air Force,
And what was your highest rank?
Staff Sergeant,
And in what general location did you serve during World War II?
Pacific,
Okay.
Pacific Theater.
Were you drafted or did you enlist?
I think I was drafted. I'm fuzzy because I kept trying to volunteer, but I had 4 brothers already in. So the draft board in Suffield had a certain reluctance because this was after the Sullivan tragedy, and my parents didn't object. Nobody objected. They just sort of voluntarily pushed me aside. And I never had anybody tell me we left you home because we didn't want to take another one from your family. But we surmised that that was it. So I already had 4 brothers in.
And how did you eventually get in then if they were kind of trying to ignore you?
Well, I'm sure it must have come to the point where I was drafted.
Okay.
And I went, I guess I must have reported to Bradley Field, the Air Force at Bradley Field, because Bradley was up and running a few years by then. And I went from Bradley Field to Fort Devens in Ayer, Mass. A-Y-E-R, Ayer, Mass. That was the induction center for the area at the time. And when I got to Fort Devens, I immediately applied for Air Force, hoping that I could get into pilot training, because I already had a lot of friends that were being trained in flying, and my brother was flying pursuit ships planes at the time in training. My brother was 2 years older than I. So I wanted, and then all my buddies were getting into flight training. By that time, I was over at University of Connecticut, and every day it was somebody else that had been accepted for training in flying. So that was the whole emphasis. Anyway, I immediately applied to get into flight training when I reached Fort Devens. And in my papers, there was record of a concussion that I had had as a kid from falling off a bike. And they couldn't accept me as physically qualified until there was a waiver. My recollection is they had to wait for the waiver to come from Washington so that I could get into that training. So I spent months cooling off and waiting at Devens, Fort Devens. And while I was there, I was an escort to the new guys who came in, taking them around to the various speeches that they had to listen to and so on. It was kind of ridiculous, but I was there for weeks. And
was Fort Devens also the basic training location when you first went in?
No, it wasn't designated basic training. Indoctrination Center. The basic training that I got, Air Force basic training, was at Greensboro, North Carolina.
So that happened after the Devons,
Yes, that was
waiting at Devons to begin
waiting
with.
at Devon's. I waited there so long I began to rot.
Good.
And then, so the next thing was the basic Air Force training, Greensboro, North Carolina.
Mhm.
Coldest winter I ever spent anywhere
In North Carolina?
in North Carolina. They put a bunch of cracker box type barracks out in a swamp, literally in a swamp. They were up on stilts, and when it got cold, it was penetrating. We had those soft coal burning space heaters that if you didn't die from the cold, you would be snuffed out from the carbon monoxide. So anyway, I spent,
How many weeks was that, roughly?
oh God, it was a long time. That's all I did was wait,
Even at basic training?
sit around and wait. Anyway, so I was in Greensboro, and during all this time, of course, I was getting frequent reports from my brother, who was then flying P-39s and P-40s and whatever, you know, because he ended up in a P-47, but he kept egging me on, and so did my old classmates from school, from prep school. Guys that had gone in. One of them was flying DC-3s, and some of the others were in fighter planes. If you weren't flying something hot, you were a failure. But okay, so then I went from okay, then they
Was that the next up to Laredo after that, you said? But I'm not,
no, I'm not up to Laredo yet.
okay.
I was assigned as a gunnery instructor after Greensboro. Okay, by that time they were calling from Europe, calling back some of the guys who had done their duty in Europe flying. And that's where this CGOS, Combat Gunnery Officer School, guys who had been overseas and put in their 25 or whatever their assignment of missions was, were back here, and they were being trained to go to the Pacific for the inevitable invasion of Japan. And so I was instructing them in the basics of the caliber 50 machine gun when I just got so sick of being horsed around that I wrote to my brother, who was by then, he was a radar officer for the 315th Bomb Wing. That different brother, one of the others, and I remember sending him a telegram, "Get me the hell out of here or I'll go nuts." And he went to his commanding officer and said, "I got a brother that's he's actually gonna go home if you don't do something with it." And so I got assigned to the 315th Bomb Wing.
Did you go directly from, was that due West South Carolina where you were doing the
Yes.
instructing?
Yeah.
And then you went from there to where, to form up with the
Yeah.
315th Bomb Wing?
Yeah.
Was that?
Well, I wasn't instructing in Due West, South Carolina. was I? That was, there was a college program set up to cool some of these guys down that qualified for training, and they just didn't have the facilities to take them on at the time. There were such schools, colleges, all over the East that had a bunch of guys who had qualified for flight training and no place to put them. So they were in a holding pattern. It was a shame. It was a waste of money, waste of manpower, but that's what happened. So I was at the school in due West, South Carolina, Erskine College, and a nice old Baptist college out in the woods. That was quite an experience too, because we're in the South, in the severely segregated part of the South, if you can imagine. I can remember the attitude of everybody there was it. These were just slaves. That's it. And I recall some of the things that were done. I remember one night there was a bunch of guys went in to get drunk, and one of the guys, I guess they called them rednecks, had a penknife that he carried in his hip pocket next to his wallet with the blade open. And he got into a fight with a black guy in town. And he pulled that knife out and he told us that he just stabbed the guy repeatedly and left him. And when they found the guy in the morning, he was dead, I guess, yeah. Absolutely nothing happened. There was no investigation, there was nothing, not a word said. That was the attitude then.
Yeah. Sadly. Yeah.
Well, anyway, that's quite irrelevant for the moment, but that was one of my experiences there. And there were others, but I won't dwell on them. Okay, so it was at that point that I called upon my brother to get me the hell out of there. And they were forming the B-29 crews then for the 315th Bomb Wing. So they called upon me because of my record in the being an instructor in the gunnery school. That was in Laredo. Anyway, because of my record in the gunnery school, and my record was clean. They looked at my record, my performance record, and I was selected to go on one of these assignment pools, and it was Greensboro. No, that's where I've been. It was McCook, Nebraska. That's where they were forming the 315th Bomb Wing.
And that was with the new aircraft, the B-29,
That was the B-29, yeah.
So when you formed up there, what was your assignment on that crew?
Tail gunner,
Tail gunner?
yeah. And I guess the chart called for rating of sergeant as a gunner. It was in first promotion occasion when I became staff sergeant, and I stayed there the rest of my career.
Do you remember arriving there to that new unit, or anything about?
Getting to McCook,
Yeah.
that's where I was out in the hayfield, trying to get a ride.
You want to
Because
tell
I
that?
was one person being assigned to that outfit.
And where were you coming from? Had you gone home for a
Home,
bit?
I'd gone home.
For a quick visit?
Yeah, it was a so-called delay en route. I'd been home a couple of weeks. Then I got to
How did you get from there all the way out to Nebraska?
hitchhike.
All the way?
Yeah, it was a farmer. A farmer in his old truck hauling pigs to market or something to pick me up. That's when I slept out in the field. That's a memorable occasion.
Do you want to relive that, or do you
Oh,
want to tell
Jesus.
that story?
I do relive it occasionally in my dreams. That sign. It was evidence of the state of the economy at the time, because it was a garage that had been operating and selling gasoline on a dirt road. But it was a intersection of a road going east and west, not a north and south. They were dirt roads. If you drove across the country in those days, you went a ways on dirt road, I'm sure. It wasn't until Eisenhower got in and built all these great roads that you could whiz across the country. Route 66 existed, and there was that, you probably heard that great song, Get Your Kicks on Route 66.
All right. Yeah, absolutely.
That's where that came from.
Were there a lot of vehicles traveling, or was there rationing of fuel during the war?
Oh, terrible rationing. I remember in one of the places where I got stalled for a while, a bunch of us got together and we bought an old Model A or Model T Ford for like $10 each. And it needed tires desperately. Everything needed tires then. And the only way you could get tires was to buy something that was made out of literally shit. I mean, they just fell apart. You put them on the car and drive a few miles and it flew apart. But there were 6 or 8 of us or more that chipped in, and we bought this thing. My recollection is that it always had a flat tire. So we didn't use it very much. But where the hell was I? Well, that was in McCook, I'm sure. Yeah. In McCook, we were, my brother, who had gotten us into the outfit, gotten me into the outfit, lived in town in McCook. He was married and his wife was with him in McCook, Nebraska. McCook, Nebraska in 1941 or 2, or no, it was later, must have been 43, was just a little Midwestern hick town. You know, there was a place where you could get a beer and probably some kind of a half-ass movie theater and that kind of thing. It wasn't a very exciting place to go, but it was the only place you could go if you had a pass Saturday night to go to town. You could go into McCook and drink beer. Real beer. I think. At least you pretended it was. Anyway, my brother...
So it wasn't an exciting life in McCook,
Jesus.
Nebraska then? And you were just waiting to form up to become a
Waiting
large
for
enough
for
unit?
the outfit to get organized and go overseas.
How many aircraft in a unit like that? Do you recall?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know how many B-29s there were in a, it was a squadron first.
You weren't the only aircraft, though.
Oh, no.
So 10 to 100,
Probably somewhere 10,
around?
I don't know
Yeah.
how many. Oh. And of course, the barracks were all those prefab plywood things.
Mhm.
That was where I was when we built the outside dark room to do our own printing.
Can you describe that
Yeah, well,
and how that got started?
Connors, who was one of the Southern boys that was a gunner on our crew, was a photo enthusiast that I was too, and he had brought with him some printing paper and some film and some developer and hypo, and when we got assigned to this is early in our time in McCook, we were actually in these prefab plywood barracks that were not very substantial. But, you know, everybody wanted to send pictures home to their parents to show where they were. So he had some developer in hypo, and we decided to develop some pictures, and everybody had film exposed, ready to develop. We decided to develop some pictures. Well, we each had a shelter half, which is a big piece of pretty much opaque tarpaulin. Every foot soldier was issued a shelter half in his pack. And the reason it was called a shelter half, it was half a pup tent. So when you were in the field, you get together with somebody else and zip your two shelter halves together and build a pup tent. So we took the two shelter halves and we took two helmets. We had, of course, the helmets consisted of a helmet liner and then a metal overlay that was the helmet. We took two helmets and we mixed the chemicals, which you're not supposed to let get over 70 degrees because they were 110 anyway. And we took the helmets, which served as a developing tray, and just by feel, unwrapped the film and put the chemical into one of the helmets and then put the shelter half over it so it wouldn't get light struck badly. But, you know, we worked the film through until we thought it was done, and then we put it in the hypo. We had no way of intermediately washing. You know, when you're doing home photo lab work, you used an awful lot of water just to wash out the previous chemical. But anyway, we managed to get negatives, and then if you take a negative, most of them were 2 1/4 by 3 1/4, about that size. You take a negative and put it against the printing paper, which is a silver compound sensitive paper. I can't tell you this. I can't tell you what the chemical is, silver iodide or something like that. But you put the negative against the printing paper and expose it to the sun for a short period of time, and then you've got a discernible print. Now you couldn't wash it to stabilize it. You didn't have the water to wash it. So you get it out of there and you got a print, best you could get, and immediately wrap it up in something black like the paper that came on back of the film and send it home. So when the word got out that we were doing that, everybody was at our door, including the commanding officer. I remember he came, he wanted some pictures to send home. And so we had some pictures. They would last long enough so you could get them home, so they could be sent home. And after we had done that for a few occasions, we decided we needed a dark room, because we were out in the open doing this. So they were building barracks in the area all over the place. And we got the word out that we needed some material to build a dark room. You didn't have to say that very often before you had guys at your door carrying sheets of plywood that came from somewhere. So we built, and I had a picture somewhere around here. There is a picture, or it's gone now. It's just a plywood shack made with a door that you came in, and then you had to do a right angle turn and another to keep the light from coming in. But we used that as our photo lab. And I don't know where we got the water. It was drinking water, but guys were stealing it, bringing it in, because we had to have some water. And but we put out a lot of prints, and had a lot of happy people able to send a picture home of what our life was like. That was something. I guess Connor is the guy that came up with the idea we'll do this under the shelter house. He was a character, this southern hillbilly.
Was he one of your close friends in the service?
He was, yeah, Bill Connor, yeah. Where's the book? I'll show you a picture of him.
How are things going?
Oh, I'm full of shit, Shirley. Okay. If you look in the bottom row, I'm in the corner.
Let's hold it up to the camera a bit and we'll be able to see it.
You got Connor.
And we'll make a copy of this
Okay. Well, you better make a copy of that picture.
and digitize it, but it's also now part of your video.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this guy here is Bill Connors, right there.
What we'll do is we'll try to label a copy that we'll make, and I'll come back and do that with you.
Okay, there's me here. Oh, I can't see much.
It's okay.
And the next one is Duhamel. And the next one is Connors, and the next one's Sabota. Oh. Oh. Well, that'll rise to the surface. This is the guy that was prematurely bald. And he used to say, they don't put marble tops on cheap furniture.
That's a good saying.
And he was a Southern character.
So that's that was the unit that you formed over. That was your crew.
That was
That
the
was in the
crew.
photograph. And we'll make copies of that, and then we can put subtitles under each person, but we'll do that separately in a scanned document.
All right.
So we don't lose track of it. But what we were showing was your crew on the aircraft forming up in Nebraska.
Yeah,
And
yep.
do you remember what time of year it was that you were in Nebraska? Was it the summer?
Well, it was end of the summer, because I lay in that grass, listening to that sign being blown, squeaking away. I don't know. It must have been July or August.
Do you remember what year
Oh,
it would have formed up?
no, I don't.
It doesn't matter.
45, probably.
So the war in the Pacific was still going on at that time,
Oh, yeah.
which is where you were intending
Oh,
to
yeah.
go.
No, the whole thing that I was in, the B-29s were specifically to bomb the hell out of Japan, knowing we were going to have to invade. And there was just a god-awful accumulation of expensive stuff, like Jeeps in crates piled right up, like crates of oranges on the shores of Guam. And there was just billions of dollars worth of stuff that was taken out into the sea and dumped.
After the war.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So now you're back in Nebraska. At what point did you had done training there, I would think, some flight training or not?
Yes, yeah.
To get accustomed to the aircraft?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And
Yeah, we did a few dry runs up to the Marianas. We flew around. We landed one day at Okinawa. One day we flew up and landed at Iwo Jima.
this was after you left Nebraska, though, obviously.
Yeah,
When you were in Nebraska, you did some flying or not a lot?
not a lot,
No.
not a lot. You were lucky to get your hours in. To get your flight pay, you had to get 5 hours in per month.
Okay.
So, you know, that's what everybody was, you're standing around waiting anyway. But everybody's preoccupied with getting enough flight time, so they get their flight pay, which is 50% of your base pay.
Do you remember what your base pay was back then?
Oh, God. No,
No.
I don't.
So at some point now you're leaving. Do you leave as a complete flight crew on that aircraft?
Yeah.
Along with other aircraft? So you ferry
Yeah.
together or?
Frankly, I can't remember how many flew out at a time. But, you know, we were on Guam, so we weren't headed anywhere. We flew a couple of dry run missions just to get acquainted with where we were going, and
Do you remember the trip to Guam from Nebraska, where you might have stopped along the way?
yes. Yes, that's when we flew over, landed at Johnson Island, then Kwajalein, and then Honolulu, I guess. Because somewhere on the way over, I stayed one night in Honolulu. It reminded me of a border town in Mexico.
Honolulu did.
Honolulu. Nothing attractive about it then.
When obviously that was after Pearl Harbor, so I imagine there was still a lot of devastation at that
Oh,
point.
God, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It was just a border town. A border town is about as basic and dirty as you can get. Dirty of mind and dirty of being. I mean, what the hell, you're going to go tomorrow and get killed? Sky's the limit tonight.
Yeah. And from there you flew on to Guam, but you
Yes.
thought perhaps one stop in Tinian or somewhere
Somewhere like that.
like that on the way.
Somewhere, yeah.
So when you arrived, do you recall your first thoughts of arriving on Guam? I mean, do you remember arriving there, flying in?
Yeah, I guess I do, because when you got to the base, there weren't any buildings to speak of. Just guys in tents. And of course, the first thing you had to do was go to the bathroom, so you got an outhouse. And then you got, you're dirty and sweaty and you want to get clean. And the shower was a spray nozzle at the end of a drop pipe under a canvas, like one of those backyard pools that you, cool pool, or what is it, up on the trestle. And you take a shower in that water, and then you begin to feel something growing in your ear. and it is ear fungus. And you've always got the shits. I mean, you would stop, take a shower, and go directly to the latrine.
And start over again.
And start over again. And then you go to eat, and you'd have a bucket, like a big garbage bucket, on top of a burner to keep it stewing, and a great barrel of swill that was called supper.
Yeah, but what was in that swill? Who knows?
Jesus, who knows? There was lots of goat.
Lots of goat.
Lots of goat.
Really?
Yeah. Lots of goat meat from New Zealand, I guess they said it came from, I don't know. It was
Tasty?
apparently, well, it wasn't quite deadly, but it was apparently somewhat nourishing. And the only beer you had was 3.2 beer in those days, because you couldn't allow the enlisted men to drink anything with alcohol. They might get unruly.
And did they?
Well, if they could, they would.
So officers were allowed to have hard liquor?
Officers could have booze.
Oh.
My brother, who was in headquarters, would get a jug he could get booze. And every once in a while, he'd slip me a bottle of something, rye or something like that, but not often.
So that was, how about water? Plentiful or not really on Guam?
Plenty, if you wanted to call it water. You don't know what the hell was in it. And I don't know where it came out of the jungle from somewhere. The water was frightful. They called them Lister bags. It's a canvas bag hanging on a tripod with a spigot at the bottom. And that was your water. But I don't know where it came from. It came out of the jungle somewhere.
Were there a lot of diseases in that environment, like malarias, or not that you recall?
Well, there were, yeah. Well, everybody had the shits. It was continuous. Your water was a continuous laxative. Somehow on its way through, you absorbed enough to sustain life, but it was bad.
So now going from that, segueing into being on your aircraft with that in mind, and you're flying in the tail. Can you describe what life was like on the aircraft itself? You were a tail gunner. And if you could just describe to people that may not know what a tail gunner on a B-29 is, can you describe the aircraft a little bit and how it was designed? And
Yeah, well, the aircraft was the first bomber made with a pressurized cabin. Prior to the B-29, everybody had to wear an oxygen mask above 20,000 feet. Now, the B-29 was designed to cruise at and bomb from, to cruise at, I don't know what we were supposed to bomb from, but it was a 30,000 foot elevation flight.
well,
And at that, you could not live unless you had an oxygen mask and some ambient air to mix with it from within the airplane, or a pressurized cabin. So the cabin was pressurized. That included all of the parts that had crew, except but not the bomb bays, or that mid area, or the middle of the airplane, where you had the two scanners sitting and sort of watchdog. So you go up and with oxygen ready in case anything happened to the pressurization. You'd go up to a high altitude. You get much better speed, you cover a lot more ground, and you'd get up there and cruise. And incidentally, nobody knew anything about the jet stream then. The jet stream was discovered by B-29s. They get up there and they know what the hell is happening. We're going like hell. What's doing it? It was a tailwind from the jet stream. So.
was it colder up there, obviously, too?
Oh God, yes. You had electrically heated flight suits that you plugged in, and 12 volt, I guess, 24. I don't know I can't remember the voltage, but yeah, everybody had a flight suit that was electrically heated. You didn't use it all the time, but it was on you. You know, you could be between 10,000 and 30,000 feet. You might use it some, but I can't remember just how much we used them.
Now, if you were the tail gunner, I'm assuming that's at the back of the aircraft, but could you move around in the aircraft easily
Yeah,
or not
well, you
really?
can see from those pictures how much you can move
Yeah,
around.
we'll scan those afterwards, but for the viewing audience at the moment, how would you, were you pretty much secluded to your spot in the
Oh,
rear of
God,
the aircraft?
yes. You were there. It was like going into a old-fashioned telephone booth and then having somebody lock the door. You were there. And you stayed. And I remember one incident. They were having a crew check to make sure everybody's okay. And the pilot would call and say, everybody check in. Well, they got to the tail and I did not answer. So they'd, oh, Jesus, he's in trouble. We got to depressurize and go down to 20,000 feet, then check him. So with great reluctance, they knew I was up to something. With great reluctance, they decided they had to depressurize and check. So they first you got to reduce the cabin pressure to what's outdoors, and then you got to go down to about 20,000 feet, so you can move around in the airplane without the pressurization. So they got down. They finally got back to me, and the only thing wrong with me was the throat mic that would have broadcast my okay. I got curious about what the hell made it work. And I took a penknife and I took it apart. I had all the parts. Well, Jesus, I was just a kid.
Was that a problem for you? Did that cause trouble or not? Not serious.
By then they were used to my idiosyncrasies. So, well, by then I had probably developed some pictures for them, so they forgave me. Jesus.
So you were a bit of a rascal at that point in your life?
Well, I guess so. I used to do the best I could to get into trouble. You know, well, you got a flight crew of 10 guys, and they're all filled with hormones. You can imagine what they did when they got a weekend pass. Always talking about it, and always chasing some broad somewhere in some town. It was obviously, it was the favorite subject of conversation.
Sure.
Sex. And you had some good imaginations, and some that were actually experienced. But the rest of you just wished you were.
So that was the life on Guam.
That was the life on Guam. No, we played a lot of cards in the barracks. We played a lot of poker.
Did you get mail frequently from back home, or?
Yes, but I can't remember how frequently.
And you said you had 4 other brothers. You were the 5th brother in the service at the same time. Were
Yeah.
they communicating with you, or trying to, or family?
Well, they did, yeah.
Yeah, but not
Yeah,
not
they
like
were- yeah.
today, I'm sure. But
Yeah.
movies at all? Any entertainment?
I guess there was, yeah, outdoor projection. Yeah. Then occasionally you had a traveling show. We had, I think we had Bob Hope a couple of times. You know who he was.
I do remember.
Yeah. Hmm?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, well, he
He's
got
a
to
good one.
Guam a couple of times.
Did you get to see him?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, he did.
The whole world came. Jesus, what a mass of guys from all over the island.
And he used to bring along other guests, as I recall.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. You're making it sound like fun. I mean, shit. I just,
When you weren't in the latrine, yes.
no, right, exactly. Oh, God.
So at what point in the war was that? The war hadn't ended yet.
No,
You were preparing, as you were saying earlier, they were stockpiling equipment for the potential invasion.
yeah. Yeah, we were getting ready for the invasion. Yeah, that was just common knowledge. You know, we're going to invade Japan. What a slaughter that would have been. Ooh. They even had kids equipped with bamboo sticks with poison on them. It's too bad I can't find my big album. I don't even know what I did with it.
Well, if you do, we'll also
I
scan
don't
that
even know
for
where
you.
it,
Yeah.
I don't even, I had,
So did you fly any flights, actual missions, near the end of your tour, before
No.
the war ended?
no. I didn't go on a single bomb run. No.
And then
Just 2 or 3 times to drop food on the PW camps.
was it
But that was after the war was officially ended.
so you were trying to supply the prisoner of war camps at that point,
Yeah,
after the war?
yeah.
In Japan? Or were they on islands?
On islands. Yeah.
How would you do that? I mean, are you landing, or are these in
No,
remote
you-
locations?
No, you didn't. You didn't land. No, there was no field big enough to land a B-29 in Japan. Not that I know of. It must have been somewhere. We could. Well, there was a field on. As I said, Iwo Jima. There was a long enough strip there. There had to be, because the whole object in capturing Iwo was a rescue place for B-29s on their way back
Ah,
from Japan, from a bombing run on Japan. And of course, the round trip from the Marianas up to Japan in a bomb run just about left you bone dry in the gas tanks. Damn little left. And because of that, a lot of them were ditching, meaning they had to come down in the water. And there was a whole bunch of submarines laying off the Japanese coast, ready to pick up B-29 crews. My cousin, who was one of the officers on the original Seawolf, was commander of one of those rescue ships. His name was Dick Holden. He had quite a career.
so these were U.S. submarines off the
These are
coast,
U.S. submarines.
waiting for the rescue
Yeah,
of
way
downed
back in
pilots.
the early stages of the war, the Seawolf was out doing things. He was one of the officers on the Seawolf. The Seawolf had such a good reputation that one of the atomic subs, nuclear-powered subs made very soon after the war was the Seawolf, the new Seawolf.
So did the war end, how long were you in Guam before the war ended, do you recall? Was it over a year, or?
No, not over a year.
No.
Less than a year. I can't give you exact dates.
Do you recall how you heard about the war ending and what had caused it, or not?
I can't recall where I first heard about it. And I can't even recall when we were first aware of the existence of an atomic bomb. But it leaked out somewhere I don't really remember where.
The B-29s that delivered that one, the bombs, the famous ones, that wasn't out of your same,
No, it came out of
Wing.
Tinian, I think. The first one was Boxcar, B-O-C-K. That was the name of the pilot. Bach, B-O-C-H. So they named the plane Boxcar.
yeah,
And then the next one was Enola Gay,
yeah.
and he was the mother of the Tibbets, the pilot. And after the war, long after, while we were having our B-29 reunions, we had Tibbets as a speaker for one of our reunions. San Diego or somewhere. We had a reunion every year. Ain't much left of it now. I don't know. I don't know who's left of the 315th Bomb Wing.
Well, you clearly are.
Well, sort of.
And there is an aircraft in Connecticut that's been restored, actually on display up at Bradley Airport.
Oh,
at
yes.
the Air Museum.
Yeah.
And you said you had,
I didn't get on it, but I've seen it.
but you've seen it. But I did see a photo, which we'll also scan, that you were actually in an aircraft that was still a flyable version of it.
That's the
Not
one
too
that
many
was
years
there
ago.
recently,
Right.
called Fifi.
Right.
And that's maintained by an outfit called the Commemorative Air Force, which is pretty much individually supported. Guys that are rich, I guess.
Were you able to fly in that or just get on board?
I just got on board.
Yeah.
You could fly in Fifi if you wanted to pay the price. Something like $350 to take a ride.
Were you tempted?
No,
No.
no.
How did it feel to get on board or be close to one again?
Kind of nice, yeah.
I would think.
Reminiscing,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, yeah, it was kind of nice. I could get up and I crawled right through. Sat in the seat, just like I always used to. The gun sight was a pair of knobs. See, that had a radar gun sight. Brand new innovation when it was designed and put into a B-29. Not only did the B-29 have the extremely high altitude capability, but it had remotely controlled guns
Controlled from where?
from the various sights. You had gun sights. There was a knob here and a knob here. You look into it here, you can track. In fact, they had one.
So it wasn't mechanically connected to it, it was
No, it was electrically.
remotely,
Yeah, electric.
and that would turn the gun.
It was a varying intensity transformer, I guess, of some sort. So you had, in the tail, I had a 20 they called it a cannon, 20 millimeter cannon and 2 caliber 50 machine guns. And then when you moved forward, there was a turret up front with 3 or 4 caliber 50 machine guns, and there was one down under the belly, and there were lookout posts on the 2 sides of the fuselage. Those are the guys called scanners. And if you were being attacked and you could see the attacking airplane, you could just take over all of the guns.
Who would, any one of the,
Any one of
so
the
you and a tail gun could take
yeah,
over
any one of
all the
people
weapons
that
if you had to?
could operate it, yeah.
How did you do that? Was there just some kind of a switch you threw and
I don't recall. I guess you had to say you were doing it.
yeah,
I don't recall it we ever practiced doing that. I missed a big chunk of the training because they were training the B-29 crews to some extent in the Caribbean. We went to Jamaica, so you could fly long flights over water and do some other things. But I missed it because I got some childhood disease that I had never had, like scarlet fever or something like that. And I was in the base hospital in McCook, going from one disease to the next. And in the meantime, the crew is all down over Jamaica, like that, with their vacation training. It was a story of my life in the service anyway. I always got screwed in one way or another. So, anyway, I went in I probably told you this story. Did I tell you this story? About getting out of the hospital, the base hospital.
It's worth repeating for the camera.
Well, the guys were all down in Jamaica getting their vacation training. I guess it was pretty nice facilities. Going to be a nice send-off for B-29 crews. So I went into the hospital with something like scarlet fever, the base hospital in McCook. And they began to give me pills, lots of pills to take. In fact, I had something that required penicillin. And so they started shooting penicillin in my ass. I had 86 shots on 3-hour intervals till they finished that.
86 at a time?
No,
Each time?
86
Total over a period of time?
total
Or?
over a period of time, once every 3 hours.
Yeah.
Then I went on to the next disease. I don't know what it was, whooping cough or something. And they started giving me all these pills like they're giving me now. I got one pill now I'm supposed to take. She's going to make sure I take it. It's a happy pill. And so but it's a
So
tough-
how did you get out of this mess? Did you ever recover? Obviously you did.
Well, I was a pincushion. Yeah, I recovered. And I got over whatever they were treating me for, and I went on to the next disease. In my room in the base hospital, my clothes were over there on a chair. And when the crew got back from the Jamaica, my buddy, the co-pilot, came to see me because they were without their tail gunner. They had somebody else, and they weren't interested. They weren't interested in keeping him because we were all buddies by then, you know. So the co-pilot came found out that I was in the hospital because they had been away for like a month. And he found out I was in the hospital. He came in to see me. He was a doctor anyway. He was almost. So he learned what they were doing. He wasn't. He was in medical school when he went in the service. He did become a doctor after he got out of the service. But he came in to see me. And they said, well, you can't take him. He's crazy. What do you mean? He said, well, he was in a crash, and everybody on the plane was killed except him. And he doesn't remember it, so he's crazy. And no, this is a true story. Well, he came in, he says, bullshit, you know, there's nothing wrong with him. So he came into the room, got my clothes off the chair, threw them over on the bed, said, "Put those on. We're walking out of here." There was no discharge procedure. I got dressed and we walked out.
So you never did crash and you weren't the lone
There
survivor?
never was a crash. Nobody knew where the crash was or what the hell they were talking about. The ones that were crazy were the hospital staff. No, that actually happened. I didn't even know that till after we got together after the war, several years. He told me that story.
Really?
Yeah. So,
So now, at some point, it's time to fly home, I would hope, if the war is over. you
didn't
said.
fly home. Came home on that song, The Slow Boat to China.
In reverse.
We took it home. It was, I've forgotten the name of it, and I had a little book that somebody did while we were on it.
Did the whole crew come that way?
Yeah, I think so.
So no one got to fly the aircraft home?
No. No, they probably threw it in the ocean.
You think so?
Oh, sure. Costs a lot of money to keep one of those things in the air.
Yeah. That was a modern aircraft at the
Oh, you
time,
bet
though.
it was, yeah. Yeah,
So it took a while to come home.
8 or 9 days. I
Do you
recollect.
remember where you arrived when you got back to the States?
Yeah, in San Francisco.
Okay.
I do remember that,
And
yeah.
then how,
I don't
what happened
know.
then? You somehow got from there back home or
I can't
train?
remember how I got back home. I probably, with a bunch of other guys, probably got off the boat and started drinking beer.
And then you were in Connecticut again.
Yeah, then all of a sudden I was in Connecticut. And my brother, who had been the fighter pilot, had been home a few months by then. As soon as he got home, he got involved with the American Legion. And they were building a Legion Hall. And he got friendly with the builder. And the two of them worked every day on that thing. They literally built the Legion Hall in Warehouse Point. Do you know where Warehouse Point is?
I do, but for the camera and future generations, if you want to describe, was it near Bradley Airport?
Yeah. Yeah.
Current time, yeah. Which is where you lived before you went into the service, was
That's right.
Warehouse Point.
Yeah, I didn't tell you that story. When we all went into service, my mother did everything, and my father both did everything they could to support the war. My father had a traveling job, and he got a certain amount of gasoline under the rations that were then to go out and go. He was inspecting buildings, to go out and do his inspection work. But we lived in Suffield on a little dirt road that we owned, and he had to use the car to get to work. So they gave him adequate gasoline to drive his car to work. And by then he had 4 boys in, and he was not going to do anything to take advantage of the war situation. So he decided he would move to where he could travel by public transportation. So he moved to Windsor Locks, or he moved to Warehouse Point. They looked around Windsor Locks. His plan was to take the train from Windsor Locks, which had a pretty active rail service. So he moved to Warehouse Point on the Four Corners. There's a seafood restaurant there now. I don't know whether you know the area. Very good seafood restaurant on the corner in Warehouse Point, which is right next to where we used to live. They bought a house there and moved into it, and he would then get his work assignment, and if the job was within transportation, public transportation, train or bus, then he would take the train or bus. so they wouldn't have to burn gasoline. And then, if it was within 10 miles of home, he would ride his bicycle. He'd go out and do his work, ride his bike back home. And at that point, there were 4 stars in the window, because there were four of my brothers were in. Not me, I wasn't in yet.
But then there became 5 stars
Yep,
when you were in.
yep,
Did any of your brothers pass away in the war or not?
no,
No, they all survived.
no. The oldest, Roger, was in the Navy, and he was immediately assigned to coastwise escort, and he was assigned to the Plymouth, which was a former cruise ship or cruise yacht of the Vanderbilts, built in Germany. They gave it to the U.S. Navy, and it was converted to a gunboat, and it was a escort, Atlantic coast escort. In those days when the Germans were coming over and landing on the shore and going for a beer. So he was assigned to that, and they were torpedoed and sunk immediately. He had rehearsed how he would get off it if they were torpedoed, and he got up on deck, and the guys were hesitating because the guys who had already gone in were being eaten by sharks. And he said, "Get in the water, jump in." They wouldn't do it. He said, "You stay here, I'm going." So he left, and he jumped in. And as I say, the water was full of sharks eating the guys that were gotten busted up. And he jumped in, and the kid next to him had no life preserver, and he couldn't swim. Well, my brother took off his life preserver, and he gave it to the kid. And then ultimately he was rescued. I don't know about the kid. But Roger was rescued. He got back to Washington, and in his, I can't remember his progression, but he was assigned to the National pathology. What the hell? Anyway, he was assigned to this hospital in Bethesda. In fact, he was appointed as deputy director of the Jesus, it's on the tip of my tongue all the time.
It'll come back. And then you still had 3 other brothers as well.
Yeah, well, they were still. Well, David was flying over in Europe, and he was flying a P-47 off a landing strip that consisted of iron pads that were put down on the beaches of Normandy, or near the beaches of Normandy. He was in a fighter bomber group. You've been to Bradley, there's a P-47.
Yep. Thunderbolt, I think it's called.
Thunderbolt, yeah. He had one of those, and they would move right along with the battle line. This was after the invasion of Normandy, of course. At his funeral, his former CO said, we would take off to get over the battle line, and by the time we got over the battle line, we'd be full of holes. So he flew that 85 times before he was sent home.
And you had two other brothers?
Yeah, well, I haven't gotten to that, but David, on one occasion, he came upon a bunch of guys, ground force guys, at the battle line, who were surrounded by Germans. And he and his wingman made their pass, bombing and shooting whatever they could. And they turned around and then they realized that these guys were trapped. So they came back and relieved the guys of their predicament. These are ground force guys. And freed them. And at the end of the day, these guys had to find out who the hell had saved them. So they found out, and they made ground contact. And David and his wingman, they wanted to find. So they found them. They said, "What do you want? We're capturing all kinds of stuff here." So his wingman said, "I want an automobile," and David said, "I want a motorcycle." So, so we got a picture somewhere of David on his German motorcycle, but the only
You can take a picture of me if I come through there?
what? Come in, Shirley.
Okay.
'Cause
No, I just.
Shirley, what was Roger's outfit? Deputy director of what?
The autopsy people there.
Oh, I know that, but what was the name of it?
But what do you call it? The
More?
armed service.
Armed Forces Pathological Institute.
There you go.
Yeah. that was
Armed
it.
Forces Pathological Institute.
Now you can sleep.
Now I can sleep. So
It's the two of us together that.
it takes the two together to get a sentence together. Anyway, Roger was deputy director of that.
Okay.
And then he went on from there to stay in the Navy and milk the system, but, you know.
Do you recall the coming home after the war?
The
Were there
one,
parades? I mean, what was the reception when you came
I
home?
recall the parades in Warehouse Point. Yes, absolutely. Because Warehouse Point had the best fife and drum corps you can imagine. Boy, they would stir your blood, I'll tell
yeah,
you.
they,
And David was
Very good.
one of the kingpins of the American Legion, who had gotten started by then. And they just had, when they celebrated, it went on for like a week.
well, they were, yeah, oh, I know.
So
When they-
it was an enjoyable homecoming then.
Oh, God. It sure
A little
was.
bit too enjoyable at times.
What?
Um,
Sure was.
Got a picture and an invitation,
I
Bob
think-
Warner,
Oh,
for his 90th birthday.
this is one of my,
Do you think there's anything else, Erwin, that you'd like to add to this before we wrap it up?
oh my God.
But Erwin, answer his question.
What?
Answer his question.
Is there anything else you think you'd like to add to the interview before we wrap it up? Have you forgotten
No,
anything you'd like
because
to
I
say?
I'm so full of shit, I'd never stop.
Well, this is your opportunity, but
This is another part of my life's history. This is a guy I worked with at Aetna. And they're having a birthday party for him soon.
Perfect.
His son,
October.
he's a senator from
But
Virginia.
Mark Warner is his son,
Mark Warner, who
He
was
was-
governor of Virginia, is his son.
and he's
Wow.
been a senator. or
So
something.
now they're having his 90th.
Isn't that
But
great?
he's pretty lame too.
Oh, yeah.
His wife, he has a cane. And he's,
Okay, well, I think we can wrap it up here, but
All right.
on a personal note, I'd like to thank you for your service.